Hello and welcome to this presentation from the Urban Penguin. My name is Andrew Mallett, and in today's presentation we're going to take a look at how you can configure the way in which history stores information from your bash shell. Of course you want to be able to recall commands, but there are going to be some commands, such as where you have credentials, that you don't want to have recalled. Also, we perhaps don't want multiple occurrences of exactly the same command being stored in our history. So with a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of application, you can make sure only what you want is being stored in your history, so you can make the best use out of your command line history recall. And hello and a big warm welcome to the command line of my Vagrant system. This is running Ubuntu 22.04, so the latest and greatest LTS version. We can always use the hostname ctl command to be able to print this, and we can see then it is 22.04.1. However, what we're looking at is going to be vaguely the same across all Linux distributions. The only difference is going to be the default value to the variable that we're going to be concentrating on. And we want to look at how your bash history is going to be working and how we can help tune that bash history. By bash history, every command that we run, such as ls or cd, is going to be stored in your history. And that's going to be stored both in memory, but on logout is going to get synced through to a history file that is reloaded every time you log in. It's even going to be persisted on reboots of our system. So your history can be really useful. But what we don't want is it to be cluttered up with a lot of irrelevant commands. On Ubuntu, by default, it might appear that it's working quite reasonably. If I go through and run the ls command, and immediately follow it with the ls command and the ls command a couple of times, if I go through and take a look at the history, we can see that I issued the command cd on line 10. On line 11, it lists the ls command, and nicely only once, not 3 times. Then we see the history command. But if we look back on line 9, the ls command is there. So we are getting duplicates, but we just don't store duplicates if they're immediately typed after each other. Also, another good thing that is the default, if a command begins with a space, it's not recorded. So if I go through and put a space, and then let's say date, the command works without any error. However, if I up arrow key, we can see it's still printing history. It doesn't show me the date command. Now, it's not particularly useful for something like this. However, if I needed to set a user password and I wanted to pass the password through with something like password at the command line, hiding those credentials, making sure they're not in my memory resident history and most certainly not going to be in my file-based history is a really good idea. So I do like the idea that those commands that start with a space are not part of your history. To control our history, we have a variable and we can print it with echo $hist_control. The variable name is hist_control. However, to read the variable, we have $ in front. Another way, if you want another way to read variables, is declare -p. Now, if I don't put the variable name, every variable is going to be printed. So that's not particularly useful. But if I use declare -p and then hist_control, I can use tab completion on this. We can actually see then its value coming back. So its hist_control is set to ignore both. Again, if I go look and look more simple way, we can see then with the $hist_control and the echo command, again, we can see it has the value of ignore both. Well, the first thing we have to understand is ignore both. Well, what is both? It's commands that begin with a space and duplicates. So it's equivalent to ignore space, colon, ignore dupes. So for one thing, I like the shortcut, but like most shortcuts, it doesn't really explain what's going on. It would be great if we could understand a little bit more of what's going on, and the fact that ignore dupes is not fantastic. Ignore dupes is the idea that if a command is an exact duplicate of a previous command, it's not going to go in the command history. So that's what we're seeing when we type ls 3 times. But if we typed ls, then cd, and then ls, well, we're going to have ls recorded twice. So that's not the best setting. I can clear this by using Control and U. And we can see the problem by using ls, cd, ls, and cd, ls, and then look at my history command again. We can see that each one of those ls commands and cd commands is being recorded into my history. We might prefer to change that setting from ignore dupes to erase dupes, where we go back through the complete history and we look for any duplicates and remove them. If we look at setting this, so I'm going to clear my screen. We can make sure that it's an environment variable, so it's available to all commands in my shell. Export hist control equals, and then we can go through and put erase dupes, colon, ignore space. So any command that starts with a space is going to be ignored. That was set by default in Ubuntu, not set by default in Red Hat based distributions. The erase dupes is making sure that we don't just ignore duplicate commands, we check our history and remove duplicates from the history. So now when we go through and hit enter, if I run the cd command now, and then run the history command, I can see that I only have cd listed once. We only have history listed once. If I go through and run the ls command, and then the history command again, we can see we've tidied up our history even more. We only have the one occurrence of ls by itself. To be a duplicate, to be either ignored or erased, it has to be the exact same command, including all the options and arguments, as is previously recorded in your history. If I go through and run the date command, we can see that I've previously run that at step 4, run my history again, and we can see now that it's removed from step 4 and shows it in step 13, my most recent history. So this way we're keeping to our history to be the most effective without taking up too much space or too many lines. Having set it for this shell, if I log out and log in again, I'm going to lose that value. So what I'm going to do is just grab my command so I can go through and just copy this. I want to make sure that it persists, so I'm going to open up my .bashrc file. I'm working in my home directory. Hidden files begin with a dot, and I'm opening up the .bashrc file. This runs every time bash runs. I can move towards the end of the file. We can see here as I move down, we've got the hist control being set, and I can go through and paste it in. Mine's being exported, theirs wasn't. We no longer need their entry, so I can go through and remove their entry. I could have just added it at the end of the file, but as we saw that it was set there, I might have overwrite it where it's being set. With that in place, I can use then my Control and S to save and Control and X to then leave that. When I log out and log in again, my history is going to be maintained, but also the value of the hist_control variable. So let's just quickly log out, log back in again. And then we can check that everything is working properly by going through and echo $hist_control. And we can see then that we've got the correct settings that we need, as well as my history being in place. Thank you very much for watching, and I do hope you found this useful.
All that is left to say is thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this, then you are probably sadder than I first thought. For more of this drivel, please subscribe, like and comment to @TheUrbanPenguin.